Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I am going to be doing an Ask Me Anything to celebrate hitting 5,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel. I hit this goal kind of just, in the middle of the major, and I, put a vlog out recently where I was just kind of doing like an end of year update, and I mentioned that I would do an AMA if people were interested in it to kind of celebrate hitting the 5K subs goal, and there was a lot of interest in it. We wound up getting a little over 20 questions come in, and so that's what this video is going to be. I'll have timestamps if there's certain questions you want to focus on, and then avoid certain questions you don't really care about. And if you missed out on this one, I certainly will do one in the future, I'm sure, at some point. And you can even leave a question in the comments, and I'll probably answer it if there's something that's, you really want to know that you weren't able to submit in time for the recording of this video. But yeah, folks, if you don't mind, and if you haven't already, also do consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Again, we did hit our goal for this year, but definitely just looking to keep the channel growing going into next year. So would appreciate the subscriptions, the likes, the comments, all those things help feed the algorithm. But without further ado, let's hop into these questions. And these questions are going to range from stuff related to esports and Counter-Strike, and then there's, I think, a couple in here that are just kind of random things. So should be an interesting mix. And we'll actually start with that. With our first question, this comes from Willow Dawnseeker, sick name, by the way. And they asked, what is your top 5 albums? And I assume they meant musical albums. And this is actually a tough one for me to think of because my musical tastes are all over the place. Like, I like some old school stuff, like Rush and, things of that nature. I like some metal like Metallica and Megadeth and Pantera, Mastodon, so on and so forth, System of a Down. But then I like, more modern like metalcore or alternative rock like, Rise Against, Day to Remember, The Human Abstract, Muse, and then indie stuff like the Black Keys, The Strokes, Rival Sons, Billy Talent, Highly Suspect, Future Thieves. There's even that like Bill Murray project, which is kind of an interesting one. It's a band named after the actor Bill Murray. And it's like this weird blend of like rock music and like a little bit of country twang to it. And it's the lead singer of the band called Attack Attack. It's kind of like his side project. So it's kind of like a cool one that I've been listening to. Then I like rap music, J. Cole, Big Sean, Eminem, Logic, the list goes on. So I really do have like a wide range of musical tastes. There's not really hardly anything I don't listen to other than like country music. It's really the only thing that I don't really enjoy. And I tried my best to come up with 5 albums here that I am currently liking. So there's a little bit of recency bias in this, but also this is some stuff that I think would stand, for the test of time. I probably would still go back to some of these albums as a favorite of mine. So the first one I'm going to do is the self-titled and first album from the band Audioslave, and the name of the album was Audioslave, and this is in the early 2000s. And if you don't know who Audioslave is, you're missing out. This was a fantastic supergroup that was essentially Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, the lead singer, meshing up with Tom Morello and the other musicians from Rage Against the Machine. And their first album, Audioslave, is just a fantastic rock album. I think Chris Cornell is one of the best rock vocalists of all time. Tom Morello, obviously a genius guitarist, and they just put on, great music together as a group. Hits on this are like Show Me How to Live, Gasoline, Like a Stone is probably like the most popular one from this one. Shadow on the Sun. There's so many good songs on this album. And they had 2 other albums that were also really good. Man or Animal was from the Out of Exile album. The Out of Exile album is their second album, also very, very good. But if I had to pick one, I would just pick the Audioslave album just because, they are just a fantastic group. The next one is going to be really random. This is Currents by Tame Impala. And when I'm kind of doing this, it's like, what is an album that I can turn on and listen to from start to finish without skipping a song and enjoy myself? Again, because my musical tastes are all over the place. And Tame Impala's Currents album is so freaking good for this genre of music, like lo-fi, EDM, pop. Like, I don't really know what you would describe it as, but there's so many hits on this Currents album. The Less I Know, the Better, The Moment, Reality in Motion, New Person, Same Old Mistakes. There's just so many good songs on this album. I can listen to it from start to finish, and it's just like a nice chill vibe, very starkly different from the Audioslave album that is, a harder rock album. So really do enjoy Currents by Tame Impala. I think it's just banger after banger on that one. Then I love the band Rise Against. It's been a band I've enjoyed for many, many years. And I don't know, I kind of want to say that Siren Song of the Counterculture is probably my favorite album from them. And so that would probably be the one that makes the top 5. Just so many good songs on that one. But I also do really like their albums. Appeal to Reason and Endgame would be the other two albums I really like. The Suffer and The Witness is also a pretty good album. So mostly they're like older stuff, I guess. But if I had to pick an album, Siren Song of the Counterculture would probably be the top one for me. Then A Day to Remember is a band that I've enjoyed for a very, very long time. And so I would probably go for Those Who Have Heart would probably be my favorite album from them. But Homesick and What Separates Me From You are two other really good albums. Common Courtesy is also a pretty good album. Old Records also a pretty good album. But if I had to pick one, it would be For Those Who Have Heart, and then Homesick and What Separates Me From You is probably like the two runners up on that list. Then for a fifth album, this is a recency bias one. This is just one that, I kind of enjoyed as soon as it came out, and I kind of go back to it every now and then. And it is Austin by Post Malone. And I just think this is like a nice album for him. It was kind of him matured as an artist. It features his vocals a lot more than just him doing pop rap music. There is definitely still some hip hop vibes to this, but it also does have some more soulful kind of vibes to it. Something Real, Chemical, Morning, Socialite, Speedometer, Enough Is Enough. Like the different types of songs you get off this album all at once is really, really good. And I'm not even like a crazy huge Post Malone fan, but this Austin album by Post Malone was a really, really good one to me. Some honorable mentions would probably be like Blink-182 would be an honorable mention for me as far as bands I really love. I think Enema of the State, and then Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, as well as their self-titled album, Blink-182 would probably be some that would be up there for me. I think Muse has just a really good track record for me as well. Incubus would probably be up there as well for me. So yeah, there's definitely some up there, all over the place. The Strokes has a couple of really good albums as well. But if I had to just narrow it down to five, it would probably be those five that I just named. But again, my musical tastes are all over the place, and these could change at any given point in time, depending on what mood I'm in. But that's that. Second question comes from Suide3275, and sorry if I mispronounce these names. I'm doing the best I can. I kind of got these questions from YouTube content from the vlog video, as well as a community post I put up on the YouTube channel, and then like some stuff came from Twitter and stuff like that. So kind of picking and getting stuff where I could, but it's asked, how did you discover esports and how did it combine with being an EMT? So to answer the EMT part really quickly, that has nothing to do with my esports at all. Basically, I've always been interested in medicine. I was actually pre-med going into college and was on track to go to medical school to be a doctor. And then at some point during undergrad, I decided that's not really what I wanted to do anymore, just after kind of like shadowing, hospitals, and, it just was not as personal and as patient care driven as I thought it was. It's a lot more paperwork and, barely seeing patients if you're a doctor. I don't know. Like, it was kind of a messy thing when I really got into it more and more. And so I always had like this keen interest in medicine and science and stuff just in general from my school days. And so becoming an EMT was something I kind of did because it was a job that was very flexible depending on like what type of service you work for. A lot of services allow you to kind of pick your own schedule if you're part-time, where you just kind of sign up for days and just kind of fill in here and there. You can work 24s, you can work 12s, and you can just kind of pick your schedule if you're a part-timer at a lot of different services. So it just allowed me to have flexibility and have some type of consistent income, but be able to break off whenever I needed to travel to events, And so this was kind of a gig where I didn't know what I was going to be doing in esports for a bit, and I just wanted to have a flexible job. And if I wound up liking it, I could have gone all the way to paramedic, maybe bridge into nursing or something like that if I ever got away from esports entirely. So that's kind of the EMT thing. Like, it doesn't really have anything to do with esports at all. It's just something that I kind of did because I have an interest in medicine and healthcare and science, and it was just a very flexible job that you could do. And it's also a thing where the skills I learned becoming an EMT, I think, are skills that will always be useful if I ever come across a situation where emergency medicine is required. Now, of course, a lot of the things that we do in EMS, if you don't have the right toolkit, you can't really do a whole lot other than CPR and like some level of assisted breathing and like the Heimlich maneuver and like some like minor life-saving things. But a lot of stuff, if you don't have, the right equipment or medications with you, there's only so much you can do. But still, it's nice just to have that understanding of some of the basics. And, I think those skills will be helpful to me going forward. Now, as far as how did I discover esports, I actually am not 100% certain on exactly what it would have been. I think it's a combination of things. Like, I was certainly a guy who played a lot of Halo when it first came out on Xbox back in the day. This is like the early 2000s. and I was aware of MLG and aware of like the Halo circuit that existed, you know, with like old school players like Ogre 1 and Ogre 2 and, you know, the straight ripping team. And then there's like Final Boss. And there was like, you know, I was aware of like the MLG circuit in that regard. And then I was also somewhat aware of StarCraft 2, you know, and became a big StarCraft 2 fan and watched a lot of StarCraft 2 back when they were doing stuff with MLG and WCG and eventually later on with ESL and stuff like that. So always was kind of a fan of the StarCraft 2 scene. But then, you know, I was one of the ones who did kind of discover, you know, professional Counter-Strike through the CGS, you know, when that was on DirecTV and, you know, when that was going around and stuff like that. So I was kind of aware of esports in kind of a bunch of different directions. Now, as far as Counter-Strike in particular, I think that really it was, you know, I actually competed in Halo on PC, if you can believe that. I mean, it was actually garbage, right? It was nothing like Halo on console, because Halo on console is just like a hit scan FPS game. You know, you put your crosshair on the target, you shoot it, you hit it enough times in the head, you break the shield, and then you kill them, and then you're either doing Capture the Flag or Slayer or King of the Hill or whatever the game mode is, and it's very, very simple. It's all about like timings of, you know, timing different like power-ups, timing, you know, different weapon spawns, you know, flipping spawns, and it's just, you know, hit scan FPS. I mean, it's very straightforward, aim, shoot. Whereas Halo on PC, the netcode was so incredibly terrible that you had to like lead your targets as if you were like sniping someone with a projectile weapon, like a sniper or something in like PUBG or something like that. Like it was nothing like actual Halo on the Xbox. You know, you'd have to put your crosshair, you know, like a few centimeters to the left or right of a target and like actually lead your shots, even though you're using what would normally be like a hit scan weapon usually, right? So it was very, very odd. And depending on how high your ping was, depending on how much you had to lead your targets. And, you know, the community itself kind of was just so proud of what it had formed, and it kind of saw it as a skill ceiling thing and had a lot of pride in being able to learn how to lead targets depending on what ping you had, and saw it as a skilled thing. But it was just kind of like, looking back, like just not the greatest netcode quality, and it was just kind of garbage that you had to play the game that way. But I played Halo, and basically a group of friends I played Halo on PC with introduced me to Counter-Strike Source kind of right when it came out. And it essentially started off as just me, we would play Halo like ladder, because there was like basically like a ladder system for, you know, Halo on PC. It was like clanwars.com, and there was, you know, a couple other different websites. Like I think TWC was one, like Team Warfare League or TWL, something like that. Cal even had a league at some point for Halo as well. And so we would like play ladders and scrims and stuff like that in the afternoons. And then like late at night, we would play like Zombie Mod or Scout's Knives or Surf or kind of like the Jailbreak, like kind of the like mini games that you basically have like on the community server browser. But eventually I got into like actually deathmatching, you know, on Dust 2, and actually like trying to learn how to aim and like spray and stuff like that, which eventually turned into me, you know, actually playing scrims in Counter-Strike Source, and then eventually competing in Counter-Strike Source. And I got to, back then, you know, I guess now when people look at like the ESEA system, it's like open, intermediate, main, advanced, and then there used to be like Premier or Mountain Dew League, and then you actually had like the ESL Pro League was like kind of the system that we kind of have now, I think. Back then you had open, intermediate, main, invite. That was the 4 levels essentially. And so I played in main, just below invite. So I was like, I guess what would be considered advanced now in CS2, something similar to that. So I did that in Counter-Strike Source for a little while, and you know, that is how I kind of got into esports, is basically through that. Now, related to this, and I think maybe Sue, I would maybe want to know some of this too, but someone else already asked this, and this came from CohenStalwick, who asked, how did I get into actual like Counter-Strike journalism or broadcasting, and how should someone go about getting into CS casting and journalism? So the way that I got into Counter-Strike commentary, because I never really was like a journalist. I did some feature writing for some websites here and there, but I was never really super into like the writing side. And I did some interviewing, like I even did some interviews on this YouTube channel. You can go, they still exist to this day. It was a show called The Hype, where I did some interviews with Counter-Strike players and, you know, people in the Counter-Strike scene. And so I did some interview content and YouTube content and stuff as well. But as far as me getting into commentary, essentially, I kind of learned about Counter-Strike commentary first through the CGS, but then I also saw Corey Dunn and Jimmy Wisenhunt commentating for ESEA for like CS 1.6 lands or ESEA lands. And when I saw that, I thought it was really neat that they actually had like somewhat of a professional broadcast for a gaming competition. And I was like, man, I really like to do that. It sounds like a lot of fun. And so I essentially started just doing fake commentary, essentially. Not fake, but I was commentating over pre-recorded clips that were being used for frag movies for like a buddy of mine that was making frag movies on the Movie Vault, which is like this, pretty popular frag movie website for Counter-Strike. And I used that as almost like a pitch to go to different like people that I knew that were broadcasting services, be like, hey, like I can do some commentary. Here's an example, basically. And I got with this one company, GameFire, and GameFire was some kind of like older staff from a company called TSN, which was like one of the like OG esports broadcasting, projects that were out there. That a lot of people came from that you would probably know today. And they had this website called GameFire that they started up. And this was pre-Justin TV, pre-Twitch. Was a situation where like live streaming was actually incredibly difficult to achieve. Like you'd have to have some pretty good know-how and equipment and internet connection. And you'd have to be able to like, host it or, buy server space to host a stream and all that jazz. There, even back in the day, there was like things like Winamp where it was like audio only, and then like you would just go into the equivalent of what is now GoTV today or CS2 TV, and you would kind of watch the game, but then listen to the commentators through like a plugin on basically like a sound player. But eventually, some like people would pop up and they would actually have their own websites where they would host a video stream, and it was like really low quality and stuff. But I didn't know how to do any of that, but I knew I wanted to do commentary. And so GameFire had people who were specialized in being able to host an online stream. And so I worked with this company called GameFire, basically commentating Counter-Strike source matches for Cal and later on some other leagues that would pop up with pre-ESEA. And it was like Cal and CEVO, and there was like a few other, things that were doing like Counter-Strike tournaments, right? And then after GameFire, that kind of fizzled out because, I'm sure there wasn't really a whole lot of return on investment on hosting, online video streams for gaming at that point in time. I'm sure the viewership wasn't that crazy, but there were other companies kind of similar to it. So one of them was called Ponage TV, and they did stuff for, Counter-Strike, Call of Duty Pro Mod, which is another PC game that I did a little bit of commentary in for the North American side. They did TF2, and this is when ESEA was kind of coming up, and there was, a couple different people at Ponage TV that I worked with. And so Ponage TV worked with them for a couple of years, and they kind of fizzled out as well. And then I worked a little bit with a company called eRev, which was like another online broadcasting thing, kind of like Ponage TV and GameFire, that was doing like COD Pro Mod and Counter-Strike. Worked with them for a little while. And then eventually I got with a company called Source Collective, which later on renamed itself Esports Collective. And this was basically the group that became the very first ESEA TV team that had the official ESEA channel on Twitch and started streaming. At first, match of the weeks were what they would do. So they would just do like one match a week, and then they kind of just did a free for all and released the IPs, and anybody could, grab an IP and get into a server and watch it go TV and stream it on their personal stream on Twitch. And so I did a lot of that as well at this time. And that was kind of the thing. But then eventually it became a little bit more, full on, where ESEA wanted, kind of everything that they could get streamed on their own Twitch channel to do so. And this was like when CSGO Lounge was really popular, and those streams would get embedded on the CSGO Lounge match pages. And this is where like really some of the online viewership started to really take off for Counter-Strike at this time. And this is like kind of, late CS Source, early CSGO, like, 2010, 2011, 2012 into 2013, when kind of this stuff was starting to happen. And back then I was working with like Van Silly, Moses, some people you'd probably recognize and some people that really aren't around anymore. And that's really how I got started. And it turned to me working for ESEA and actually starting to get paid for the first time. I think my first ever paycheck commentating in esport was in like 2011. I got a paycheck doing, some stuff, like you get paid like per cast basically. It was not much, but it was a little bit of something. And so that was like around 2011. But then I got to go to like my first ESEA lane, I think in 2011 or 2012, it's for like Counter-Strike Source and for Counter-Strike 1.6. And I was working with like, Corey Dunn, Jimmy Wisenhunt, Van Silly, eventually Moses got involved. I think Anders and Similar even came for one of the early ESEA lanes as well, over from Europe. And some different people kind of came in and out in that regard. And yeah, I worked with ESEA for a while, then eventually jumped over, worked with CEVO. They had like a partnered pro league with MLG, and then eventually they had a partnered pro league with Gfinity. And then obviously the whole circuit kind of starts from there and starts to open up. And, you got like DreamHack and ESL and all these different companies kind of come around and start doing events. And so that's essentially how I got my start, was just by being just driven to want to do it, being passionate about it, kind of volunteering my time to just do commentary when no one else is really doing it. And basically just kind of grinded early on. Anders has a similar story where he had like the whole, I think it was like Pugcast or something like that, or whatever, before he became the official NIP TV, where he was doing kind of the same thing on the European side that I was doing on the North American side. Where he was like, casting all the European games that he could solo, then eventually with Similar, obviously, and I was kind of doing the same thing on North American front. And then again, ESEA kind of eventually took control of it, and then I kind of became like a freelance employee for ESEA for a time until I moved on to CEVO, and the rest is kind of history, and I've been along ever since. Now, as far as how someone would get into it today, I actually have no idea. I think today it's so tough just because there's a limit on how many TOs even operate these days. And there's just so many casters. And when you think of like the really big TOs like ESL, Blast, and PGL, they kind of have their regular crews that they work with. And then you kind of go down from there, and that's when you get into like, maybe your ECL and then like CCT events and like the Thunderpick stuff. And there's like Eagles Masters in North America and like just these smaller things. And even those crews kind of have a pretty steady rotation of talent that kind of works through those events pretty regularly. You probably recognize a lot of their names now. But I guess if you wanted to get started now, on the casting front, you'd have to probably just try to reach out to like these smaller cups and, see if you could get involved. I mean, that would probably be the only thing I could really think of. And then as far as like the journalism side, if you just wanted to do like writing and coverage, I mean, that is a tough one. There are new creators all the time who are starting up YouTube channels and eventually getting somewhere. Like my buddy LionHeartz went from, a small channel to like having over 10,000 subscribers in a matter of a couple of years, but he was just grinding out several hundred videos a year. And was doing like daily recaps of tournaments, stuff like that. So there's always a way you can like kind of grind your way if you're self-motivated enough and you kind of find a niche or find a way to approach it that's maybe a little bit unique, or you just put in a lot of time and effort. Now, I would say you definitely need to make sure that this is just kind of a hobby and something you enjoy doing, and it's just kind of a passion project and not really something you're hoping is going to turn into a career, because the likelihood of it doing so is very unlikely. Even for myself, I've worked a major, I've worked some big events the last couple of years, but I still don't consider this a full-time job. Yes, I do make good money when I do work, but there are months where I don't do anything. And so you have to be very careful how much you commit and making sure that you have a proper balance. And so that's really the best way I could say. And, so yeah, starting a YouTube channel, starting to create content, whether it's writing stuff, on like one of these like free like websites where you can like write stuff, whether it be like Substack or, I'm not sure what's all out there these days, but that's really the best thing I can think of. And then, maybe showing up to, like, if you can get to like local lands, showing up to those and volunteering is like another way to kind of get your foot in the door and start kind of meeting people and networking, and, like if you want to do interviews, start reaching out to players and ask to do like, text interviews or video interviews, whatever the case may be. You never know, like maybe some of them will be interested and eventually accept, who knows, just all kind of depends on what you're interested in, what you're actually trying to do. And, understanding that it's going to be an uphill climb, but if it's something you're passionate about, then give it a shot, Then I have like another kind of related question here, and this is from Bustinbb. Interesting one. When did you get your break into the industry, and do you think it's still possible to break in today as a newcomer? And it's kind of related to what the last question was, but how I got my break in the industry, man, I don't know. I think my first break was like earning my first couple of paychecks, which was working with ESEA for, their league for CS Source and eventually CSGO. That was kind of like my first break. Then I feel like my second break was kind of when I finally started getting paid to go to LAN events, because the first ESEA lanes I was going to, I wasn't getting paid to do those. They were just kind of paying for my hotel, paying for my flight, paying for food, but, they weren't actually cutting me like a day rate, which is what is kind of the common way things go now. This is back 2011, 2012, 2013, right? But the next break I really got was I went to CEVO when they partnered up with MLG for like the CEVO MLG Pro League for Counter-Strike Go. And I actually got to go to some LANs at the MLG Arena in Ohio and actually was getting paid to do work on LAN. And so that was kind of like the second step that I took. And then eventually that turned into like the CEVO Gfinity Pro League. And I think the big breaking moment that happened there was at that CVO Gfinity Pro League event that I did. And this was, man, I think early 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Very early 2016 was this event. It's on my Wikipedia, but I can't 100% remember the dates. But at this event, I was commentating the event, and I commentated with Jackie, who you'll know in the scene. I commentated with Vince. I commentated with Launders, was at this event. So I was doing commentary as kind of the main thing at this CVO Gfinity event. But there was an opportunity the final day of the tournament where Puckett, who was the host of the desk, and the analysts were Richard, Lewis, and Thorin, but Puckett had to leave to travel to some other gig. I can't even remember like what it was. And so Richard, who obviously already had a lot of experience doing desk hosting, kind of pivoted into a desk hosting role. And then Thorin was the only analyst, so they needed a second analyst to work the analyst desk for this event to finish out the final day of the event. And so I actually was commentating like the semifinals on finals day with Vince. It was like a best of 5 that we covered. And it was actually kind of a wild one. I think it was like one of the first best of 5s that went all 5 maps. It was Tempo Storm, which was like the Brazilian team that had people like Henny and Lucas and Phelps and Bolts. You know, they were playing against Virtus Pro, and this was like, you know, old school Virtus Pro at Snacks, Bialy, Pasha, Neo, and Taz, right? And so I commentated that semifinal. It was best of 5 that went all 5 maps, and some of the maps even were like super long, like 16-13, 16-11. This is back when playing MR15. But then for the grand final, I was able to actually rotate and do a couple of maps on the analyst desk. I think Launders did a couple of segments as well. I think Ryu did a segment or something because he was actually there with his team, Selfless Gaming. He was their coach, but they had already been knocked out of the tournament at this point. And so I actually got to work an analyst desk with Richard and Thorin for a couple of maps at this grand final between Tempo Storm and SK Gaming. And this was the SK Gaming that actually had Pimp on it, funnily enough, and then Magisk, Madi, Freeze, and Asilian. And I got to do a couple of desk segments. And when that happened, this was when the whole E-League Season 1 was about to start. And they were having issues with like visas for Thorin. And so they needed like another analyst to fill in because Moses was like the main analyst. Richard was there as a host. But, you know, they needed a second analyst to put on the desk. So they brought in myself and Mo. And so I got to work the first week of the first season of E-League. And I feel like that was kind of a big break for me as well, because it kind of allowed me to make that transition from casting to analysis work and then also be able to kind of do both from that point forward. And what that really led to after I did that first week of E-League is I started, you know, doing other stuff in North America, like Northern Arena and like the AWPer events. And, you know, I did some stuff for Gfinity from my relationship with them back when they were working with CVO. But then I got to work like ECS, which is like the Esports Championship series that was kind of run by FaceIt. I got to work with them. And then I eventually started doing like DreamHack Opens in 2017. I did multiple different DreamHack Open qualifiers and DreamHack Open main events and, you know, remote stuff. And that really kind of kickstarted my career. And then I think that the next break probably has to be the one that I just got, right? Because I was kind of on a run for a few years there after the E-League break, but then it kind of fizzled out, and kind of like 2020 was kind of like the last year I was like really working in CS fully. 2021, I did a couple of small things here and there, but that was about it. And then 2022 and 2023, I didn't do anything at all for those 2 years in CS. And so my next break was when I got the call up from PGL to do the Copenhagen RMRs at the beginning of 2024. Or beginning of 2024. I did the Asia RMR and the Americas RMR for the PGL Copenhagen Major, the first CS2 major. And that brought me back into Counter-Strike and led to me doing the Shanghai Major RMRs and then eventually the Shanghai Major. And now where we're at now, where I've just worked a full season with PGL and Blast Rivals and a bunch of stuff. So those are probably all the breaks I've gotten were the ones I've all named. You know, I kind of had a break too as well, I guess, in Valorant, where I had a stint of working in there for a few years. And I kind of caught a break, you know, with Nerd Street doing that. But my main breaks in the Counter-Strike space would be getting my first page sub with ESEA, transitioning to working with like CVO and MLG and Gfinity, that leading to E-League, that leading to me becoming like kind of a regular on the DreamHack Open circuit and some other stuff here and there. And then the break I just got essentially with PGL, working the Copenhagen RMRs and the Shanghai RMRs and all that in 2024. That would probably be the breaks I think I've gotten. I think it's still possible to get a break today as a newcomer. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, you have seen some talent breakthrough here and there. Like obviously Ted just had a breakthrough moment where he was an analyst at a major, right? But those are very far and few between opportunities out there. You know, you do see some others like Neokai's done pretty well for himself. You start seeing him do some events here and there. as a name that's been around the scene grinding a lot. Same with like, B-Dog and Lucy, whenever they were doing the female league stuff, but they've done some RMRs and stuff as well. Look over at like Yumi and Tea Time. Like there's some North Americans right now that are in some like casting contests, that ESA has kind of brought back. And so there is some opportunity, but I do think it's way more difficult today than it used to be because there's just so many more people doing it and there's so much less access. Like back in the day, you could get access to Go TVs and do streams, like do your own commentary and like try to start something. Now all that stuff's under kind of lock and key. And yes, co-streaming is a thing, but a lot of co-streaming kind of relies on you being kind of a bigger name that a company's interested in working with to do co-streaming. And so a lot of it's closed off, and a lot of it is just you would have to really just grind out, reaching out to people and just try to find opportunities to cast even the smallest stuff possible, and then kind of use that as a launching pad and then kind of work your way up from that. But it's tough, and I think it also depends on what you're trying to do. Like as a broadcaster, I think breaking in's incredibly difficult now. But if you're trying to get into other esports related stuff, whether it be like social media manager type stuff or photography or adminning or things of that nature, that's a little bit different. I think you can kind of network, maybe volunteer at some LAN events, kind of make some contacts and kind of work your way up. And this kind of goes to a lot of people when they talk about wanting to get into esports. I always say find something that you enjoy doing and then find out how that can relate to esports. So if you enjoy doing like production and AV stuff, get into that. Go to school for learning production equipment and learning, audio video stuff, and then use that to bridge into esports production. Or if you're into IT, use that to bridge into doing adminning and IT work at esports events. If you're interested in law, obviously go that route, but maybe find a way to work with an agency or, with contract law and stuff like that in the esports industry. Or, there's so many other things, that you can kind of use in that regard, but just trying to be like, I want to work in esports, not really have any sense of direction on what you actually want to do is where you're going to run to a dead end, I think. And in a related question, I had this from Joseblua, and this is kind of in line with what we already kind of talked about, where he asked, do you think breaking into the scene nowadays as a new standalone analyst caster is the hardest it's ever been? And he kind of mentions nepotism and already established relationships that seem to dominate the higher top events. And I mean, to the degree, yeah, like if you're a company like a Blast or a PGL or an ESL, and you have a group of people that you already work with and they do a good job and you're happy with the product they put out, you don't really have a reason to pivot from that unless something happens or unless you want to just change things up a little bit or something like that. And so in that regard, yeah, like there already are established relationships that, kind of quote unquote dominate hires to top events, as this question is alluding to, but that it is just based on the hard work that those people did for years to put themselves in that position. And until they move on, or until there's a need for somebody else, then yeah, like a lot of stuff is going to be locked in. But there are every now and then moments where opportunities do arise and people can make their way up. And yes, breaking to the scene nowadays is definitely the hardest it's ever been, as I've already kind of mentioned, especially if you're a standalone caster, because a lot of it is based on casting pairs, right? Casting duos have kind of become the way that people kind of move their way up and down the ladder, so to speak. And so if you're a caster on your own, you're going to have a harder time than if you have like a casting partner that you work with regularly, that you can kind of build a rapport with, build chemistry with, and that way you can create a better product together. So it is harder. Then as far as an analyst goes, like, man, that's a tough one, because I do feel like analyst spots are going to be more and more filled by former pros and coaches and stuff like that. I'm kind of a rare figure in the analyst space, really the only analysts that are working desks that don't have some like high level Counter-Strike playing experience. Cause me doing ESEA main back when that was the second highest league in Counter-Strike Source back in the day does not qualify me as having been previously a high level player. I was like a low level semi-pro in the North American region in Counter-Strike Source late in Counter-Strike Source's time frame. That doesn't really qualify me. Right. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of people that you can think of that work analyst desks these days, most of them has some level of high-level CS experience, whether it be a player or a coach, right? Pimp, obviously. Yanko, obviously. Even Maui played like at the Mountain Dew League premier level in CSGO. That's not quite top-level pro play, but he did play, kind of at that semi-pro scene, to low-level pro scene. So even he has some playing experience. You've seen Dupree come in and do some stuff. He obviously has playing experience. Devilwalk just did the major. He obviously has playing and coaching experience. So I think a lot of the analysis stuff is kind of leaning more and more that direction. And I feel like every time a player wants to take a crack at desk analysis, they usually do at least get like 1 or 2 opportunities to at least try it out and then see how it goes and if they want to stick with it and if it works out for them. So really the only analysts that don't have any type of high-level CS playing experience would probably be Thorin. Back when he was active on the circuit, he was kind of the main one. Richard obviously dabbled in it but before he pivoted more into like being a host. And then it's like me and Bleh, I feel like. Because even like, you know, Vendetta, back in the day when he was doing analyst desk work, he had some playing experience. You know, obviously Sponge, former player, back when he was doing analysis. Same with Moses. You know, those are color casters now, but they used to do a lot of desk work. And, you know, Yanko, obviously former coach, former player within his region. So, yeah, I mean, it is definitely difficult on the analyst side. Although, you know, someone like Vu was able to break in and do analysis for Blast off the back of building a, like, tutorial type style YouTube channel, doing a lot of tutorial and like educational content. And he's kind of branched off to other content as well and has like a second YouTube channel now and stuff like that. But, you know, he was someone that kind of leveraged that into analysis work. But those stories are just so rare. I feel like most of the analysts, you know, typically are going to be coming from like former players, coaches, and things of that nature. Then I had a question from Habjammer who asked, what is something unexpected that you have learned or experienced in your time broadcasting and or being an analyst? I don't know if it's necessarily unexpected, but I certainly learned that a lot of what you're wanting to do as a broadcaster isn't necessarily what you see on camera. There's so much that goes behind the scenes, right? Like all the preparation, all the research, all the note taking, all the planning, all that stuff that people don't see. I knew if I wanted to be really good at my job that I need to be well prepared. So I need to be researching teams and players and, you know, all that jazz. I understood that, but there's just so many moving parts behind the scenes that people don't realize. You know, I don't know if it's unexpected, but it's just something that I learned along the way, that like a lot of the work that you do to do this job, a lot of it happens behind the scenes and no one sees it. Some people can skate by without doing a lot of prep work, but you know, that is just kind of dependent on the person. So I think that's definitely one thing. I think the idea of relationship forming and networking and how important that is behind the scenes to help you get where you need to be. Because, you know, it's not always necessarily the best objective person that's going to get hired for stuff. Sometimes it does come down to networking and who you know and relationships you've formed over time and how, you know, you've proven yourself to be dependable. You've proven yourself to be an easy person to work with. You know, you bring value outside of what you do on camera. You know, there's a lot of things that go into that is something that I definitely had to learn along the way as I was getting into the job. So I would say those things. And, you know, I think there's like the technical skills, like learning how to use your voice, learning how to project, learning how to vary your diction, how to, you know, pace yourself. You know, these are all things I'm still learning. And I think the other big thing that I'm still learning is the idea of, you know, not all of our job as an analyst is about analyzing the game and being insightful. It's also about putting on an entertaining product. And so there is a lot of the entertainment aspect side of things that I had to kind of learn and I'm still learning to kind of find that balance between providing insight but providing entertainment as well and having fun and having a good time and putting on a product that people enjoy watching. If you're just ramming facts and insights down people's throats, some people are going to get bored and turned off by that. They don't care. They're not that into it. But, you know, you crack a funny joke or have a funny meme or have like a hilarious moment happen on broadcast, everyone kind of laughs at and has a good time watching, you know, that's going to, you know, land with more people, right? So those are definitely all things that I've learned. And I guess other than that, you know, along the way, you have to learn how to negotiate, you know, how to understand, you know, what rates are fair, you know, what's okay to deal with, what's okay not to deal with, what makes sense, like from a traveling perspective. Like there's a lot of logistical stuff that you learn along the way as well behind the scenes. A lot of that stuff's kind of boring, to be honest. But yeah, there's a lot of different things you have to learn along the way that aren't on camera, right? There's a lot about this job that isn't in front of the camera. Only a small percentage of the job is what you see on camera. And that's the most important part in many ways. But there's just so much behind the scenes, you know, that you have to like kind of learn as you go. So I would put that up there as well. Next question comes from Cube. What was, in your opinion, the best event you ever got to work at? And I'll kind of cheat a little bit and kind of give multiple answers to this. So the coolest event as far as like a place I got to go to was when I got to work an event in Milan, Italy. You know, getting to go there and get to experience like the art and all the historical stuff that's in Milan and kind of turn into like almost a mini vacation. that was one of the first like really cool places I felt like I got to go and got to like have just a fun, good time seeing a bunch of really cool stuff and enjoying a lot of stuff outside the event itself. So I would say that. Also probably like the first times I was traveling to Europe would probably be like some of the, favorite events that I had, because I was going to do something that I had never done before. Even the first time traveling outside the United States, the first time I traveled outside the US was when I did like an EWC qualifier in Montreal, Canada. And like even that experience of like getting a passport and like traveling internationally, I don't even know when I ever would have traveled internationally if it wasn't for esports, right? So obviously that was cool. And then, I think the first time I traveled to Europe, if I'm not mistaken, would have been when I did that CVOG Affinity Pro League event in London. I think so. I think all the other lands I went to would have been in North America at the time. So that was obviously a big moment, going to England for the first time. And then it led to me going to London like a second time. And then I went to Birmingham, England for like a Gfinity event. And then I went to like 2017, I went to a bunch of places. 2017, I went to Germany for a DreamHack Open event. I went to Tours, France as well. I went to Jönköping, Sweden for a DreamHack Open Summer event in 2017. So I think just being able to, all the traveling and all those experiences would definitely be probably a big part of it. Outside of that, obviously getting to work at E-League and working on a show that was on television, on Turner Sports was obviously a big moment and one of the best things I ever got to work on. There was just so much behind it, having all the different production and staff and different things driving that product was definitely super special. And then after that, it would be getting to work a major. For the Shanghai major, obviously goes up there. It's like one of the best events I ever got to work at, because it was like a dream come true. A goal I had chased for so long, for like 10 years, basically. I was chasing every major, never got it, gave up on it, didn't even work in CS for several years, came back, and then was able to get to a major. I mean, pretty incredible stuff. The one thing I will say, though, is like, because we were doing it remotely, you didn't get that feeling of like being in the stadium with the fans, stuff like that, and getting to be in that environment. And so I got to work in major. I'm never going to complain about that, obviously. Like, it's still great to be a part of that broadcast, but there was a little bit taken away by it being remote. I think it was probably the only major ever where people were working remotely on the broadcast, unless you were like an alternate language stream. So that was kind of a unique one. And then after that, I would say the events I just did, like working at Cluj here in 2025 was like really the first time I got to work in a big stadium with the full crowd, like working on a desk with all those people around you. That was truly a special moment. I had done some smaller like studio venues and like smaller, like convention center type stuff, like some of the DreamHack Open events that I did, but not in like a big stadium like that. I think the closest thing I ever did that was like a stadium like that was when I did like Northern Arena Montreal. And obviously I had bad memories from that event. So, that kind of took a little bit of the wind out of the sails of working that arena, the Bell Center. But getting to work at Cluj in front of that big crowd at that arena would definitely be up there. And then the same with Astana, getting to work in that arena, in a different part of the world, a region of the world I'd never been to before. Those would definitely be like my highlight events. What would be the list I just ran through probably. This next section actually comes from LionHeartz, the guy I was just talking about earlier, who just hit his 10,000 subscribers. I think he's doing an AMA as well. Let's go check him out. But he said, who is my favorite player in CS in any version at any time? And I really don't know enough about 1.6 to really get into 1.6 players. So really a lot of my stuff will just be Counter-Strike Source related and CSGO, CS2. And as far as favorite CS player of all time, any version, again, I'm going to kind of cheat here. I think like as far as people that I got along with and became friends with and had like relationships with, that would be Adren, North American Adren, who was a really good Counter-Strike Source player for Team Dynamic for many years. Obviously had his time in CSGO as well as both a player and a coach with Team Liquid in particular, would be what he's most known for. Me and him have been good friends for a very long time, dating back to like 2012, 2011. We've been friends for a long time. We still talk, not daily, but we talk pretty regularly. We play games together pretty regularly. So he's definitely a guy that I just really got along with and had a good friendship with. I would say the same about Steel, North American Steel. From Source and from CSGO, and he's doing work in broadcasting now. We're not like crazy close or anything like that, but we've definitely known each other for a very long time. We've done a lot of content together over the years. We've worked together at times. I occasionally will like play PUBG with him on a stream here and there. We still keep up here and there. So he's definitely a cool dude. And then Kerrigan would probably be the other one for multiple reasons. Kerrigan not only was super nice to me when I was getting into, analysis as a non-former pro and going to some of these DreamHack Open events that he would play at, he was always super respectful and kind to me, and was even like just helpful and in some ways, and just always a really cool dude, and so down to earth, and just so awesome to talk to, so insightful, and was supportive of me in what I was trying to do, despite not being a former pro, but trying to do this analyst job. He really did, help me out a lot at some different DreamHack Open events. And obviously I respect what he's done in his career as an in-game leader, all these different teams that he's been able to bring success to. I think he truly is special, and it's probably one that I have to say is probably a favorite of mine. Fallen, the same thing. What he's been able to do as an in-game leader through CSGO and CS2 now with this new version of Furia is pretty incredible stuff. So I would say that that's probably some of my favorites, players of all time through any version. There's also a lot of players I've enjoyed watching, but as far as like favorites, just kind of full circle, it'd probably be those I've just named. Then I have another question here from BC-GX2CG. I don't know what's going on there, man. What's your favorite CS map to watch in pro play? And I feel like this has changed over time. It used to be Mirage, actually, funnily enough, because back when it was like kind of in its heyday in like, 2016, 2017, 2018, and so on and so forth, Mirage was so fun because you would learn a lot about a team by how they played Mirage, because there's so many different ways you could play Mirage from a tactical standpoint. If you were a super aggressive team, you could do a bunch of fast set plays out of spawn on the T side, or fast mid control plays, or whatever the case may be. You could be execute oriented if that was kind of your style. Or you could play slow and methodical, mid control default, spread the map. One guy be apartments, one guy playing A side, three guys taking mid control. Maybe you have like a little bit of variation of that with like one guy underpass. Maybe you play two outside A and three middle. Like you'd have some default variations. And to this day, you still see this when people quote unquote default on Mirage. But yeah, and then you could kind of go from there and decide, hey, do I want to split A through connector and window boost and A ramp and palace? How many numbers do I want each of those routes? What routes do I want to take? Which routes do I want to not worry about? Same with like B splits coming up catwalk and, engaging ladder room, and B apartments itself and different B splits and all the different utility that kind of was developed over the years on, different smoke walls that would get used at Mirage. Like obviously there was always popularity with like smoking jungle side and stair side and like CT spawn, but so many different like smoke walls got developed in CSGO. Like the Brazilians at X Games Aspen, that was the Kaboom TD team that Fallen was on. They had like this 5 smoke A execute that no one had ever seen before until they did it. And it just became like meta for a while after they did it. It's like something that would be in everyone's playbook. And then there was a couple different smoke walls that people would do that would like start at stairs and then kind of like go horizontally into A site, if you're looking at it from like A ramp as a T. And some people were like doing that, and that was kind of crazy and new and different. And then CT side too, there was a lot of ways to be expressive. Like, if you were an AWPer, how dynamic did you want to be? How much did you want to be moving around? Were you anchoring sites? Were you trying to get aggressive? Inside connector, inside window, inside middle, inside underpass. It just provided a lot of options, I feel like. So I feel like that is definitely a map that I definitely really enjoyed watching. I would say Inferno in its heyday, similar thing. It was like always such a fucking classic third map in a series, and the back and forth you could have on it. There's so many memorable Inferno matches. I know now people are kind of over Inferno in the version that we have in CS2 now, but, back when Inferno was in its prime, man, hella good map to watch and play. So I would say Mirage and Inferno were probably in their prime my 2 favorite matches to watch, and then Overpass would probably be the other one. It was a very tactical map. Manipulate rotations, different executes, different, ways you could play control on that map. Again, CT aggression's, basically a necessity. And then you kind of just slowly kind of stage backwards, so yeah, I would say those are probably the ones for me. Then we got BenjaminMcConkie, who says, when will Falcons give up on Niko? And the answer to that is like, there's so much more that Niko can still give to that team. So I'm not really sure why they would. I think he's still a high-level rifler now. No, he's not even the main star of the team anymore. Like Kiyosuke and Munisi are the 2 main stars of the team now. Now he's kind of like a 3rd star. And he's also not even like the main aggressive rifler anymore. That's Kiyosuke's job. Now he's playing more of like some of his older extremity positions, like, B tunnels on Dust 2, or playing like outside A on Mirage, or, like he's doing a lot of those things now, right? He's even given up some of like, he still has some of his start TD positions, but he's given up some stuff as well, like Banana on Inferno, for example. So I think that, he's already kind of made that pivot of not being the focal point of the team, but being more of like a third star of the team, in my opinion. I think Wanasi and Kisuke take more priority over him now. But the thing is like, the dude's 28 years old and still playing at a very high level. Right? I know people like to bag on the guy because he's had some issues at some like, majors and stuff like that. But even at this last major where they came top 8 at, he was playing at a very high level that tournament. Yeah, he had a bad Blast Rivals event leading into the Budapest major, but he played a pretty good Budapest major. And if you look at like his 2025 overall, he's still putting up really good fucking numbers. Like he's going to be an HLTV top 20 player, right? Like this year. So he's still just like an incredibly high level player. So until his like form really drops off, I don't see, why you would want to see him gone from this team. Like who would you even replace him with? Like what clear upgrade are you even going to get? Like I guess I just don't see it the same way some people do. I think some people get a little crazy over the Niko thing. Just like people were getting a little bit crazy about Munisi. They were down on him pretty hard, but he's still like a top 5 player in the world right now. So like I don't really like know what we're doing. I think sometimes people take it a little bit too far. And yeah. So yeah, and then here's the thing. Even when the form starts to dip, he could still always make that transition to in-game leading and then try that and see how that goes. So I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. And, I don't think there's any call or a reason yet to kind of do what you're referring to as far as like giving up on Niko. Like, I don't really see that making sense. I think despite Falcons' flaws at the major, they've progressively been getting better with this 5, and I'm sure they're going to make other changes before they ever get to Niko, whether that be replacing Tessus for like a true anchor, or whether that be, removing Kixon and putting Niko on the IGL position, getting another rifler. Like, I don't know. They could go a lot of different directions, but I don't see why you would give up on Niko anytime soon. Next question from Sexy6. Q6Q. Who is the most underrated AWPer at the moment? And this is an interesting question because I feel like a lot of the AWPers now on like notable teams are either appropriately rated or maybe even like a little bit overrated. So like if you just run through the list, for example, as we kind of figured out the answer to this question. Obviously Ziwu is appropriately rated. Malo is appropriately rated. Munisi's, he's not underrated, but I do feel like there was like this weird kind of like counter attack against him when everybody knew that he was really good, but then there was like this like weird like small vocal minority that were really kind of trying to push the narrative that he had fallen off or that he wasn't as good as he used to be or whatever the case may be. Anyway, I think he's appropriately rated. I think most people know Torsi's good. I think most people know Shiro's good. Brokey might be a little bit overrated actually, but other than that, if you're not overrating him, you probably do realize the pitfalls the guy has. 9-10 could be like a candidate, but I do feel like most people know that he's a decent AWPer, but not like truly an elite one. Wonderful for a time maybe got bagged a little bit too much. You could put him in the category maybe underrated a little bit. I think Wonderful could be a candidate. Woxic, I think most people kind of rate him appropriately. Same with like Device and some of these other guys. I feel like they're all kind of appropriately rated. I think Ultimate maybe be a little bit overrated. So I don't know. I feel like most people are appropriately rated. Like I said, 9-10 and Wonderful might be like small candidates that you could put in the mix. But if I had to pick one right now, it'd be Dexter. It would be Dexter. I mean, I feel like people are way too low on this guy for some reason, despite the fact that he was really good when he played this year. I mean, I know he didn't play a lot of events in 2025, but the events he played in 2025 with Falcons, he was pretty damn good. Like Cluj and Poco, and they made the final and came second, played really good that event. Didn't do so well at EPL, but at Blast Open Lisbon, and then at the Peugeot Bucharest event that they won, he was the MVP, played really, really well, right? Then in 2024, when he finally was able to consistently play with Heroic, where he didn't play for like most of the year. He didn't start playing with Heroic until like August, like regularly. Like he was kind of in and out, it felt like. So he really only played like half the year with Heroic, and that was after like a year off, basically, of not playing the game. And when he was on Heroic, on LAN in 2024, like, the dude was hella good. Like, I don't, like, he was really good for that team. Especially, like, at the Perfect World Shanghai Major when they upset Navi, and they took a playoff spot there. Played really well at that event, and played really well at other events also. Like, his ratings weren't off the fucking charts or anything like that, but considering that he had a lot of time off, and considering that he was having to miss events due to visa issues and stuff like that, I thought he was a pretty high-level AWPer. And, if you go back before that, like his late CSGO days and he was playing with like OG and Spirit, dude was hella good like the end of CSGO. So, yeah, I mean, I think that he's only 24 years old to this day, and definitely still, I think, could provide a lot of value to a team, especially in today's current opping market. Then we got FyrstZurg. Do you see FaZe, after yet another miracle run at the end of a very lackluster year, making any real improvements with this current iteration? And look, I think that you obviously saw Jacob kind of start emerging in this major, and I think that it's really big for him, confidence-wise, probably, and definitely gained a lot of valuable experience. So when you look at FaZe, if they keep the same 5, like, I do think the Twist Frozen combo is still elite. If they maintain Frozen, if he doesn't wind up going off somewhere else, and they keep him on this roster, they now have Twist established. You still got Kerrigan, who's a great caller. Like, that's a good core 3 to build around right there. And if Jacob continues to develop, then maybe something could be there. I do think the whole Brokey thing, I do think they probably need to bring in another AWPer. Like, I know Kerrigan, it seemed like, kind of indicated that he hopes that the roster stays the same. But we know that FaZe management made a move that they didn't necessarily want with the whole rain situation. So I don't really know what's going to happen there. If it were me, I'd like to see them pick up a different AWPer, like a Dexter, since we were talking about underrated AWPers. Or, who like they could have been maybe a good team to pick up Device when Device is trying to, like, maybe move on somewhere else. So, yeah, I mean, I would like to see that personally. But it's just so hard to know because they've had so many lackluster seasons that ended with big majors like appearances where they either made a playoff when you didn't expect them to, or they made a grand final of this major. You didn't never expect them to do that. So with the Shanghai major, where they made the grand final, never would have expected that considering the season that they had leading up to that major. So they do just keep showing up in the majors, man. But as far as like, will they ever actually have a season where they become like a true contender for titles and like start trying to battle for a position like, somewhere in the top 5 or even just be like a real solid top 10 team? I don't know. Again, it just depends on how Jacob continues to develop after this major. Obviously they're going to have the player break, but, how well does he show up early in 2026 if he stays on this team and stays in roles that he's got? Again, he had his moments, right at the very end going into the playoffs. But, prior to that, he was pretty lackluster. I know it was a big step up in competition from where he was at to, playing with a team like FaZe with that brand power and what some of the names that are on that roster and the tenure that they have. And he was playing roles he wasn't playing on his previous team. So there's a lot of changes that Jacob had to go through for sure and try to get through. But will he continue to develop? I don't know. The Brokey thing is always going to be kind of a head scratcher for me on what they do with that. So yeah, I don't really know. We'll have to see. Next question comes from Oscar Howell. If you had to name your favorite 3-man core from throughout history, who would it be and why? Can be any combo of players within a team, really. I would probably say one of my favorite 3-man cores would probably be the core of Fallen, coldzera, and Fur, and how that core really was the identity of what would become Luminosity and SK Gaming in 2016, winning back-to-back majors, and really like mastering how to play default CS and how to, give people freedom within defaults and their really specified roles and map positions, but then coming together in the mid to late round for like that final finish. And just how the team played, just their style of Counter-Strike. They were an incredible core to follow. I think that would probably be one I'd have to do. Obviously, it's not a core 3, but like the Astralis of 2018, like when they got, their 5 that they set an era with in 2018 and 2019. So obviously Glaive would be a part of that. Zipix, Magisk, Dupree, and Device with Sonic as their coach. Like that was obviously a core that was incredible too, because they like took default CS to the next level, started learning how to condition opponents, throw really good fakes and feints, come up with like these cool like utility gimmicks. They also had really well-defined roles, a really amazing map pool, really incredibly well-rounded tactically, so those are probably some of my favorite cores if I had to name some that I've really enjoyed throughout history. I've always been more keen on like the tacticians and like strategical stuff, and so definitely like the Brazilian core with Fallen, and then, the Astralis core would be kind of my main favorite ones. So the next question I have here is from Julian, I believe Julian. And the question was, what comedic memory has happened at an event that has made you laugh nonstop? Man, there's just so many funny things have happened at events. A lot of them I can't really share because they're like private stories behind closed doors at, green rooms or, private get-togethers, when the event's all said and done, or, even just hanging out during off days or whatever. I mean, it's just, we have such a great group. It's always a good time. Anytime that you're able to get the group together at an event and, have a meal or have some drinks after a day of work or during an off day, or, after parties aren't really a thing anymore like they used to be. Like, it's not nearly as fucking crazy. A lot of times it's just more like just hanging out and kind of chilling. There's just so many good times and stories and jokes cracked and just good times, So I think just the group that we have is just such a great group that every time we hang out, it's a good time. You know what I mean? So it's hard to pick out like one comedic memory. One funny memory is like, at E-League, I like busted my lip open with a skateboard. So that was pretty funny. Like I was essentially, it was after the first TV episode aired, like after the first week. When that group final happened and they aired that on TV, we like celebrated at the hotel afterwards, but everything was closed because we got done really late. And so people were just kind of like raiding their mini bars inside their hotel room and bringing it out to the outside lobby area, basically. And we were just all hanging out, and this group came by and like recognized us from E-League, and one of them had a skateboard. And I mean, I was pretty drunk, but the classic meme, I used to skate. I did used to skateboard a lot when I was in middle school and high school. And so I could do basics. Like I knew how to ride a skateboard properly. I knew how to like ollie. Like I knew some stuff, right? And so this dude had the skateboard, and I started rolling around the skateboard, and surprisingly was doing pretty well. Up until the very end, when I was done skating, I was going to go give him his skateboard back. There's this move you could do in skateboarding where you would like kind of slam your foot on the back of the board and kind of launch it like straight up, and you catch it with your hand. It was just like a whatever. I did that and just hit myself in the face. And like busted my lip open pretty bad, and I was bleeding all over the place. And so that was, at the moment, it kind of sucked because I was bleeding all over the place. I thought I was going to have to go to like the freaking hospital and get stitches and shit like that. And I was drunk and mega hungover the next day, having to fly with my mouth injured back home, and like it was a whole to do. But like looking back on it now, it was pretty freaking hilarious. That's probably one of the funnier things I've had happen to me at an event. Was even though it sucked, it was a physical injury, and at the moment it stunk. Looking back, it was pretty hilarious. Then DualMe1234 asks, why are you the butt of all the jokes in a playful sense within the CS casting space? And I don't know that I'm always the butt of the jokes, but I definitely am often kind of picked at and stuff like that. And I think it's just because I'm super easygoing. I'm very non-confrontational, and I'm very just like laid back and go with the flow. And at the end of the day, when you're doing the bit, whether it be an actual official broadcast, like a death segment or something on broadcast, or whether it even be like when I'm hanging out with Richard and the folks at the No Majors Club, and we're just casually hanging out, but still trying to put out a fun product for people to watch. Sometimes someone has to do it. Like it can't just be everyone guns blazing. Like someone has to take a hit for there to be a funny moment. Someone has to be willing to kind of sit back, bite their tongue, and let the moment move on. Because if it just turns into like a duel where you and another person are just going back and forth, janking each other, or joking each other or insulting each other, then it never ends. You never get to move on to the next thing. You know what I mean? So like eventually someone has to lay their guns down. Someone has to eventually be, willing to just kind of take the hit and be like, all right, you got me. And then move on to the next thing or whatever the case may be. And so like with me, I've just always been really easygoing, really laid back, really easy to talk to and get along with, again, very non-confrontational, try to be very open-minded and friendly to everyone. And so maybe that just opens me up to more often be the butt of the joke because I'm not like aggressive or confrontational or, like I try to be friendly with everyone. And I don't know, like it just doesn't really bother me that much. At first it did, but I feel like now I just don't really care anymore. Like I just have battle hardened, I guess you could say, like whatever, So that's, I guess, the best way I can answer that one. Then Averythingfades, trying to get spicy here. Who are your most and least favorite esports personalities to work with, and why? Least favorite personalities to work with. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and like shit on people that I work with, right? Like that serves me terribly if I were to do that. But if I'm being real and like just truly honest, hand to heart, no one I really work with these days is someone I don't like working with. Like the group I've worked with at PGL this year, and when I did Blast, and when I've done some other events here and there, like we have a great group right now in CS. Like there's really no one left anymore that is terrible to work with. Like there were definitely some people in the past that I didn't like working with. There's a couple different names, but those names are no longer around anymore. So, like there's really is no one. And as far as favorite people to work with, I really enjoyed casting with Vince back in the day. I felt like we had like good chemistry, good rapport, got along really well. So like he was always someone I really enjoyed working with. Host wise, obviously Richard Lewis, been fantastic to work with over the years as a host. Tech Girl, Sam has now become someone that I've worked with quite a lot, and I've really, really enjoyed working with her. I've never gotten to work with Freya, so that's someone I would like to maybe work with one day, because she is such a great host. I've never actually gotten to work with her on a desk before. And then, yeah, like all the co-analysts I've worked with, I really, really enjoy working with. I've worked with, over the last couple of years, I've worked with like Pimp, Yanko, Bleb, Maui Snake, some of the like HLTV guys came and did some stuff recently, like Striker and Professor. Vendetta came back and did an event. Yeah, there's been a lot of Vu I did some stuff with as well. Darth Mike when I was doing like blast stuff. So yeah, and there's been many other people I've worked with throughout the years that I've enjoyed working with. So I really enjoy everyone. Like there's really like, I guess if I had to pick like a favorite, like I'd be hard pressed to do so. Like I think working with Sam and Richard both are great, experiences. They're obviously different, but they're a good time, no matter who I'm working with. And then I feel like Maui and I have like really good chemistry and rapport together on a desk, but I work well with anyone and enjoy working with everyone. So I really don't have a favorite per se. I know it's going to be like a really, kind of like maybe safe and not as spicy as you want it to be, but that is just what it is. Then I had a question from Cravasity, I think. Do you have any new forms of content for the channel you plan to upload in 2026? And the answer to that is I'm not sure. I might try to do some behind the scenes content next year. Maybe like do like a studio tour or like an arena tour, or maybe bringing in behind the scenes on what it's like to, to get prepared for an event, and, stuff that goes into getting ready and all that stuff. I have to be kind of careful with that because obviously, some companies don't want you like showing stuff that might be like a trade secret for them, or obviously people, want their privacy, especially in the green room where we're all kind of hanging out and trying to let loose and, blow off steam and prepare for our next segments or communicate with each other about the segments, stuff like that. Like people don't want to be filmed in those situations, right? So you have to be kind of careful with that, but I'd like to try to add some maybe behind the scenes content or vlog type stuff, and really, I think more than anything, I just want to make sure I stay consistent with content on this channel. And I feel like when I went to events this past year, I did basically no content at all. And so I feel like I need to be at least trying to do like a video or two, even when I'm at events, to stay consistent. So that's kind of the main thing. As far as any other forms of content, I don't know. I might do like some more like tactical overview type stuff with like Skybox or something like that. Maybe I can do an interview here or there. There might be some stuff, but I would say it's more about just staying consistent all year round, even when I'm at events, and then maybe adding some behind the scenes stuff. Then a question from B. Is there anyone in the scene, whether it's caster, analyst, or observer, who you would like to work with in the future at an event? Yeah, I think I already said this. I've never worked with Freya. I know she's a really good host. She's very well respected. She's worked really, really well at that role for many, many years. But I never worked a desk with Freya. And so I think it would just be kind of cool to finally get to do that. But I've pretty much worked with everyone else. So as far as like who you would like to work with in the future event, I've pretty much worked with anyone else you can think of in the CS space, I think, at this point. Like I can't really think of someone I haven't worked with that's like currently in the space. Obviously I don't work directly with any of the casters because they have their own casting duos and they're off on their own. But as far as like working a desk, I mean, I think I've worked with pretty much every desk host in the game at some point besides Freya. And then I think I've worked with pretty much every analyst you can think of at some point. Maybe you'd have to go back like a long time ago to like a DreamHack Open in like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. But at some point, I feel like I've crossed paths with pretty much every active analyst today and many of the analysts that have served as an analyst at some point in time in CS, right? Same with host, So, yeah, I feel like, yeah, I pretty much work with everybody. So that'd be the only one I could really think of. Another question comes in for Cravasity. And that is, what are your goals as a broadcast talent for next year? And so my goal is just to be consistent, to just be working as much as possible and to just stay active. That's really the main thing, not only for financial security, but to build on my brand, to grow my brand, to grow my product, to get better at it, and to just get to do what I love, so being consistent would definitely be it. Being able to continue my relationship with PGL is super important and continue to do good work with them, but also being able to branch out, work with others, I think is also very important. And then obviously like working another major would be huge, right? Whether that be next year or the year after or whatever, like getting to work at a major is always a huge goal. I've only gotten to do one Granted, I never thought I'd get to do any, so that I've done one, like I always have that now, you know, right? Like no one can take that one from me. So like, at least I have that, right? Even if I never work another one, at least I have that one. So that's good. But yeah, working in a major, obviously a big one. Working a major grand final. I haven't done a grand final at a major. I've only worked one major. I didn't do the grand final. Not that I understand why, obviously I was a new one. So yeah, getting to work a major grand final would obviously be a goal at some point, and just really getting to work more grand finals in stadiums at like big events is just like, even if it's not a major, you know, I did the grand final at Cluj-Napoca, so that was like a big arena grand final that I did, but getting to do more arena grand finals in general, and then obviously a major grand final would be like the real big one. So that's kind of my main goals, and that's going to do it. I mean, a lot of the other questions I got were kind of already answered in other questions that I've done here. Like there was a couple of repeat questions basically. And so I feel like even if I didn't read your question, I probably answered it in one of the other questions I got asked. Like they were just really closely related. So I just kind of like combined them in a way. And so, yeah, that's going to do it. I appreciate everyone who submitted a question to this AMA. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you got some cool answers out of it and maybe learned something. You know, again, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question to this AMA, either because you didn't see it or what have you, you can definitely leave a comment and I'll probably answer it down below if I have time. Or I'm sure I'll do one of these at some point, whether it be another video or whether I do one like on the CS2 subreddit at some point or whatever the case may be. I'm sure there'll be more opportunities to ask me questions, but you can always leave a comment in this video if you really had one that you really want to know right now. And if I have some time, I'll answer it for sure. And you can always reach out to me on like X/Twitter. I'm usually pretty open to answering stuff on there as well. So that is going to do it for this one. Again, thanks so much for helping me hit my 5,000 subscriber goal this year. Again, hopefully we can try to hit 10K in 2026 and just keep looking to grow the channel, keep staying consistent with it, and, you know, keep getting out there working on the analyst desk is the other big goal. I think I already have some events lined up for next year to kind of kick off the year, but there's also a lot of mystery, you know, where I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll have to see how it all shapes out, but that is going to do it, and I'll catch you next time.